Good Thursday to you, everybody, in Gov 603. Welcome again to week boom, bam, 14 and our review of week 13, the answers. Okay, let's take a look at questions and then some of your answers, and we'll see what we can add to them. Okay, the first one, this is one I want to make sure that you understand because I've been reading through your responses and I see a lot in the way of the technical definition. Some of it looks copied and pasted. I'm not pointing any fingers, but I want you to be able to understand this and translate it back into simple English if you are asked to, like on an exam. A wink. All right, the question is explain the following two terms: critical junction analysis and comparative historical analysis. Okay. And I asked you to refer to an article, the article that you read about it in explaining it. Okay, Maya, let's take a look at you, see what you did here. Comparative historical analysis is a field of research characterized by the use of systematic comparisons and the analysis of processes over time to explain large-scale outcomes, such as revolutions, political regimes, welfare states, etc. Okay, excellent. We'll start right there by way of a broad definition. So when you're and they're both qualitative methodologies. Okay, so if you're like, what kind of a research is this? Comparative historical analysis looks at history, the process of things happening. Okay, and it assumes that the major driver, that is what makes things happen, what causes things to turn out the way that they do. Right? Comparative historical analysis assumes that the major driver, okay, is a causal factor, a drawn out process over time. So it's sort of the difference between, say, let's take, let's see, where's an example? Okay, let's take the conclusion of the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon. And I'm thinking of that because I'm going to go to the movies later today. And I remember about a year ago, or maybe November, I was very excited to see the movie Napoleon with Joaquin Phoenix. Actually, the name is pronounced Joachim, but I'm not telling anybody how to pronounce their name. It's an old European name. And the movie was just awful. I think it was a waste of the actor's talents. It was certainly a waste of time, and in no way captured what was the essence of a very, very charismatic figure, that is, of Napoleon. Okay, my critique of the film aside, all right, so let's take a look at, say, the events that unfolded in the post-French Revolution period in the rise of Napoleon, so let's say early 1800s. What was the major driving factor to these events? Was it the building of forces, causes within Europe, that is, the decline of the monarchies, which led to the French Revolution, and then a willingness of so many other peoples to join Napoleon's cause as he made war throughout Europe and quite deliberately smashed monarchy after monarchy and brought them under the control of his new vision of government, in which there was judicial reform and currency reform and promulgation of rights in some places. Okay, was that the major driver, these large scale forces sort of converging at this particular point in time? Those who assume that events in history are driven by these large scale movements, say, 2020 to 2021, the coming of the COVID virus, the lockdowns and the maskings and the mandated vaccinations. Was that historical event caused by a coming together of forces, say the rise of the influence of the pharmaceutical industry and the rise of cooperation and dependency of government individuals and organizations on big tech. So the censorship of certain ideas and comments, like, Joe Rogan says ivermectin, and everybody goes, ah, okay. Major events that come and focus in a place. Comparative historical analysis assumes that's what makes history go. That's what precipitates historical events. Okay. On the other hand, in comparison, that's to that approach assumption of what makes history go. Okay. Critical junction analysis. All right. This assumes that there are these singular, more pinpoint causes for history. So in the first example, it's Napoleon himself as an individual. He is the major causer of the revolution that spread throughout Europe in the early 1800s. Now, I'm not saying this is the case, but I would say, this would be a way to analyze it. Dr. Fauci, as someone who was part of moving grant money, and this isn't an accusation, this just is, to labs in China to do research on viruses, specifically gain of function research. And gain of function research means that you study and or engineer how quickly a virus replicates, and viruses replicate by attaching themselves to other cells. Really is, it is as sinister as it is fascinating if you understand how this stuff works. I'm looking for a blank page on my sheet. So it kind of goes like this. We're just I'm getting you a picture here. We have a cell, and inside we have a nucleus, and then in there we have some DNA. Bear with me. Okay, and then we have this little rascal here, this virus. We'll make it look like a coronavirus. Okay, I'm drawing you a picture of how it is that a virus replicates itself. And then it has spike proteins on its outside. Being very patient, thank you. Okay. All right. Okay. So here, this is how viruses replicate themselves. So up here, this is a cell within your body. Could be any cell. It could be in your skin, could be in your liver, could be in your lungs. All right, doesn't matter. And inside of every cell in your body is a strand of DNA. Now that DNA is the code that tells that cell what it's supposed to do. So it's supposed to make sweat because it's a sweat gland cell. It's supposed to secrete insulin because it is a cell on your pancreas. It's supposed to absorb nutrients because it's a cell in your intestinal linings. All right, there's something wrong with the camera here. Let's see if we can get it refocused. Right here on my finger. All right, bear with me. Okay, so it has this little piece of DNA that the cell reads, and when it reads it, it's like, okay, do this. Well, this is a virus. And viruses are very curious. They're not alive, but yet they have a mechanism by which they replicate themselves, which is something that only living creatures do. I mean, put a pile of rocks in your front yard, diligently observe it with your pad and your pen and see if, if there are male or female rocks, or if you get more rocks, you're not gonna. Replication is one of, and replication, both in terms of, growth as multiplication of cells, and replication as in repetition of the self of the thing, is one of the requirements of life. But there's no consciousness, there's no growth. It's just replication. Well, the way a virus replicates itself is it floats along and it attaches to the cell. It has like these little strands of protein that they act as keys, and they're designed. And this again, part of what we don't know about viruses. They're designed specifically for certain cells, and they fit into keyholes, if you will, on those cells. So the virus comes along, it attaches itself to the cell. Now, inside of the viruses don't have DNA. Viruses have a little strand of protein that's called RNA. And what RNA does is it reads the DNA and it tells the cell, do this, whatever the this is that it's supposed to do. Here's the trick. Okay. This virus comes along, attaches itself to the cell, injects its RNA into the cell. And when the RNA gets to the DNA, it reads it. It tells the cell, it doesn't tell it like make sweat because it's a sweat gland cell, or absorb nutrients because it's a cell in your digestive lining. No, it tells the cell, make yourself into us, as many as you can. And so the cell uses all of its components inside to make itself into the virus until eventually it bursts open, and then all the newly made little viruses go spewing out into the system, and they in turn grab cells and do it over and over and over. Weird. All right. Gain of function is, how is it that you can accelerate that? And you might be saying, why in the world would you want to accelerate that? Well, if you understand how it is a virus does that is gain of function, you have the means by which to slow it down, to stop it. Okay. So Dr. Fauci was in on large amounts of grant money that were going to laboratories to mess around with gain of function. And all indications are it points right to Wuhan, and the containment procedures were really sloppy, and someone got infected with one of these accelerated gain of function viruses, these coronavirus, out into the world it went. Okay, so as compared to comparative historical analysis, critical juncture, as the name said, like a juncture, like a critical point. Critical juncture analysis suggests that there are these singular causes that then, boom, emanate out and cause major historical events. Now you might be saying, well, which is it in terms of what causes historical events? Well, that depends on your perspective. And historians and researchers argue over and over about which one it is. All right. Your job is to understand the terminology and the difference between the two. So if you're reading along and you're reading through, and these types of analyses come up a lot in political science. All right. Because the question is, what, precipitated the political change of the 1960s, just for example, or, the political tumult that we seem to be in the middle of? Is it an individual or individuals, or is it the coming together of major forces? Is the showdown that seems to be taking shape for this November's presidential election, is this due to the determination of a single individual, Donald Trump, to recapture an office that he feels was not fairly transferred? Or is Donald Trump merely the front end of a social push that's tired of sort of the same old inside politics type of people, whether they're in this party or that party, appointing heads of various federal agencies who are then unelected and unaccountable to anybody, that lay down laws and regulations and penalties that run people's lives. Okay? Well, depends on how you look at it. All right? That's the difference between comparative historical analysis, critical junction analysis. Okay, please remember that. Okay. Question number 2. Why is identity important for political science research? Is identity best used as an independent or a dependent variable? Explain your answer. Ashley, I think the concept formation and impact of identity is hugely important to political science researchers, even if they're not explicitly studying identity. That's, first of all, that's absolutely correct. You will find, you don't have to look far and deep. You will find significant voting patterns that can be predicted by how people self-identify. All right. This could be ethnically, this could be grounded in gender, this could be grounded in sexual orientation. That now, you know, remember, you're looking at you're looking at a bell curve when you're talking about these trends. All right, here's a bell curve right there. Okay, so you're always looking for what's called the central tendency, that thing that runs, you know, right down the middle. And I don't mean the mean, the exact line. It's usually like to here, to either side of it. That's called the central tendency, central to the bell curve, where most of the people or the behavior falls. So you will find certain political alignments based on expressed identity. And politicians aren't dumb, all right? They know this, and they target these identities to push support of their political parties and agenda. In fact, the practice even has a name. It's called identity politics, all right? So very, very much a part of how people behave. Back to you, Ashley. The formation of identity is inescapably tied to cultural constructs, religion, gender, social, economic, geographic, etc. There is always a significant chance that identity will be a contributing factor to empirical findings, whether or not the research design specifically acknowledges this. Now, and that's an interesting way to put it, Ashley. And this, you know, you're not wrong, but let me go back to that sentence here. Okay. The formation of identity is inexplicable. There's always a significant chance that identity will be a contributing factor to empirical findings. Okay. Yeah. So in other words, there's always a chance that identity is going to be a variable, and it is. It is. Okay. Reference to that. Okay. Further authors. Okay. Let's see. What do you say? Further, the authors point out the process of framing the problem representation are based explicitly on identity and relates to people interpreting information and making decisions about issues due to their perceived identity. Incredibly significant. Researchers explain how identity affects political issues, so it can't be ignored. Researchers should, ultimately, the studies presented in the article make it clear that there isn't necessarily one preferred method. However, the appropriate use of identity research should be intentionally utilized based on a particular research question hypothesis being investigated. Okay, that's true. But is it best used as an independent or dependent variable? Maya, what did you say? Researchers should evaluate their purpose in studying identity. Do they wish to explore if identity is causing a person to do a particular thing, the independent variable, or if something else is causing the person to adopt a particular identity, dependent variable? Hence, identity can be used as an independent or dependent variable based on the purpose or objective of one's study. Exactly. And Ashley, apologies if that's what you were trying to get at. Exactly. It's not necessarily one or the other. Now, it's frequently used as an independent variable. Say, well, you know, people's identities are fill in the blank, and therefore we predict that they'll do fill in the blank. But it can be used as either. Right? Kind of a trick question. Question number 3. Trade-offs in measuring identities. Comparison of 5 approaches. Pick one of the experimental techniques suggested to measure identity. Briefly summarize the technique. Discuss why you would use it in research method. Joshua, identity in open-ended surveys or interview methodology. Open-ended survey approach is unique in the realm of identity because it allows respondents the ability to present their identity in their own words, and that would allow for nuance that would not be available to be captured in closed-ended survey. Okay, good. In other words, Now, you can establish and establish, meaning identify, establish, identify, and then research identity as an independent or dependent variable, both in a quantitative and a qualitative way. So remember this too, because that might come up on a test somewhere. Okay. And you can do that, say, quantitatively by giving people a list of common, say, political identities or ethnic identities and asking them to choose. All right. Or in a qualitative way, you can ask them an open-ended question and then listen to what they have to say, record what they have to say, and establish certain key words that are giveaways for identity, and then do content analysis of all the people that you interview. And go, oh, actually, see, look, this key word or this key phrase keeps coming up. This tells me that blankety blank percent of these people identify in that way. Okay, good answer. Question number 4. Why, according to Pearson, are trends in political science much harder to measure than those in economics? And do you agree? Okay. Let's see. Who do we have here? Stephanie. Pearson states in this article that accurately measuring the pulse of political requires patience and knowledge of how issues change and morph over time due to social events. I agree with Pearson because politics is ever changing, much harder to understand the complex issues within politics impact so many. On the other hand, economy can be tracked much easier, and the issues impacting economics are more easily understood. Okay, so and that is what Pearson says. Okay, that the one is more predictable than the other. Ashley, let's look again at yours. As seen in this week's reading, as Claire Pearson makes a case for inherent difficulty in measuring trends in politics, but I believe he presents an argument that's much more nuanced than black and white proclamations, stark contrast to measuring economic trends. See here, and I like that you say, okay, yeah, there's more going on here. You say, Ashley, and here's why. All right, I don't necessarily agree with Pearson on this issue. Why? Because economics, what comes out in the numbers, that's all downstream from human behavior. The same is true in political science. That is, voting patterns, adherence to, certain doctrines and dogmas and political platforms and so on and so forth. So I don't entirely disagree with Pearson. However, here's something that he's getting at. People's adherence to certain parties, persons, or planks in a platform, all right, tend to have the potential to be more ethereal, that is, move around with greater rapidity than their adherence to people's parties or planks in a platform that apply to their economy. Why? Because when it comes to conceptualized, how someone thinks, elements that they relate to their economic well-being, that is, am I going to have enough in the way of food? Can I afford, housing? Do I have gas? Am I going to be able to retire? People tend not to shift around as much. They tend to be more steadfast and consistent in their adherence to certain practices. Now, they do change. They shift around over time, okay? But not as readily as their tolerance for political ideas. For example, witness this, okay? This is so frequent, it's almost a given. You watch, you could even go back, you look at this historically, but watch going forward. When a single party, political party, captures both the executive and the legislative branch, it frequently happens that the legislative branch, because the elections for Senate and House are staggered, for the executive branch, for the presidency, it's fixed. It frequently happens that control of the legislative branch flips to the party not in control of the executive. This happened under Donald Trump. This happened under Bill Clinton. This happened under Barack Obama. This happened under George W. Bush. Okay. People are more willing to say, yeah, okay, that's enough of this. And we're not, I can't say that they haven't expressed discomfort for a single party controlling, both the sort of boots on the ground operational components of our government. I mean, it's a threefold government, representative, executive, and judicial. Judicial is supposed to be nonpartisan and remains over here and is very constant. The ones that are in flux and drop things like spending and declarations of war and executive orders and all that stuff, that comes from the legislative and the and the executive. People seem to be uncomfortable with both of those branches in the hands of a single party, and they will frequently flip the legislative midterm of the executive. You don't see them do that where economic processes and policies are involved. They're not going to go, yeah, we've been tending to save, XYZ under this president, but now we're just going to blow it. Everybody off to Vegas, whee! So although they're both downstream from human behavior, politics and economics, and they're twins, but they're brother and sister. So they're alike, but they're not identical, and they're very, very closely related. The one tends to be easier to study, that is economics, because people's behavior in regards to that tends to be more predictable than in regards to political science. Okay. All right. That's all for. Good job, everybody. Now remember, keep working on your papers. Keep studying for that final exam. Okay. That's coming up. And bear in mind that I'm here during my office hours in these last couple of weeks of class to help you. All right. I'm thinking about you. I'm praying about you. And I will see you again on Canvas in this coming week. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.